My name is Verity Langford, and by the time I walked into that gala, I had already been forgotten by the very people who were supposed to know me best. They didn't see me when I stepped through the marble entrance alone. Not my parents, not my sister Clarissa in her designer gown, not the cousins huddled around the champagne bar whispering about promotion cycles. To them, I was still the woman who didn't make it, the sister who failed, the one who'd walked away from the family business dinners with quiet smiles and unpaid parking tickets. What they didn't know was that I had built something far away from their view, something too quiet to post on Facebook, too powerful to need applause. That night, the lights shimmered over crystal glasses, and people posed for photos beneath banners, bearing the name of Clarissa's company, a rising star in consumer data intelligence. The same company I had once believed in more than she ever would. I didn't wear a gown that sparkled or shoes that clicked across the ballroom floor. But when the CEO paused on stage, eyes scanning the crowd to find me, the donor they'd been praising in whispers all night, the entire room turned to look. And Clarissa, my golden sister, blinked in confusion as the spotlight landed not on her, but on me, and that's when everything began to shift. Growing up in the Langford household meant living under fluorescent lights and heavy expectations. My father was a regional banking executive, the kind of man who ironed his newspaper before reading it. My mother kept our home pristine and our shame quiet. Perfection wasn't praised, it was required. And in that world, success had a dress code, a resume, and a 5-year plan laminated by age 16. Clarissa, my younger sister, thrived in that environment. She got straight A's, wore pearls to brunch by 17, and spoke like she had a PR rep from birth. She was everything the Langford legacy wanted: polished, dependable, unblemished. I, on the other hand, questioned things. I majored in computer science and design when my parents preferred finance. I took internships at startups instead of the family-preferred corporate ladder. I didn't want to follow a legacy. I wanted to build something that hadn't existed before. I launched my first startup at 27. It failed by 30. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. No headlines, no lawsuits. Just a slow erosion, burn rate rising, investor confidence shrinking, me working 18-hour days trying to duct tape innovation to payroll. When it was over, I stood in the ruins of a dream and watched people I had trusted quietly step away, including my parents, especially my parents. The night it all came crashing down, Clarissa invited me to her birthday dinner. I showed up, exhausted, my heart still half in a pitch deck I had thrown away that morning. Everyone else arrived in bright pastels and confidence. I sat in a corner, nursing a flat glass of white wine. Midway through the appetizers, my mother leaned toward me and asked, not unkindly, "Are you okay? Do you have anything going on, dear? Or are you just catching your breath before you try something else again?" That was code for, "Are you done embarrassing us yet?" I remember blinking at my plate. The untouched scallops suddenly too perfect to eat. "I'm figuring it out," I said. "It's a transition." "Of course," my father added, as if he were speaking to a case study. "These things happen. Not everyone is meant for leadership." Clarissa gave me a look I'll never forget. Not smug, not cruel, just settled, like she had finally accepted that I was the cautionary tale. That was the night I stopped trying to win their approval. I realized they didn't want to understand me. They wanted to contain me. And failure had given them the box they'd always needed to shut the lid on me completely. So I disappeared. Not physically. I still showed up for holidays, sent polite replies to family group texts, mailed gifts for birthdays. But emotionally, strategically, I moved underground. I stopped explaining what I was working on. I stopped asking for interest, attention, or approval. I let them keep the version of me they found easier to manage. And while they saw stillness, I was in motion. I took everything I'd learned, the bruises, the burnouts, the betrayed NDAs, and started again. Not to prove them wrong, not at first. I did it because I couldn't stop building. It's who I am. I began consulting behind the scenes for early-stage ventures, quietly investing through a legal entity under a neutral name. I created VL Syndicate first, then restructured under Langford Meridian Ventures, never attaching my first name, never giving anyone the chance to trace it back to the failed sister. One by one, the companies I backed began to grow. One of them, Evolve Insight, stood out. A clean data analytics startup with aggressive growth potential, led by a founder who wasn't just hungry, but adaptable. They needed capital, they needed time, and they needed a CMO who understood consumer behavior and optics. They hired Clarissa. I never said a word. I watched from the shadows as the company flourished, as Clarissa proudly announced its progress over dinners and press interviews. She would talk about their success in such glowing terms, you'd think she'd been there since day one. Maybe she believed she had been. Maybe she thought she was the reason things moved forward. She never once asked who had underwritten the Series A round that saved them 18 months ago, or who had doubled their bridge funding when the first client defaulted. She never imagined it could be me. And I was fine with that, until the gala invitation arrived in the mail. A formal black envelope trimmed in silver, honoring our partners, past, present, and future. My name wasn't listed. Just a +1 for my parents. A nod to family, not inclusion. Still, I RSVP'd, not to be seen, not to make a scene. But because some stories don't need telling, only revealing. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes with being underestimated. People don't guard their conversations around you. They assume your presence is harmless, your intentions irrelevant. It makes the shadows a surprisingly efficient place to work from. Quiet, steady, undetected. After I walked away from my family's expectations and the public embarrassment of my failed startup, I rebuilt with purpose. Not for redemption, not for applause, but to understand value, the kind that isn't listed on resumes or shouted across dinner tables. I started consulting. At first, it was small. Early-stage founders desperate for advice on fundraising, market fit, managing co-founder meltdowns. I didn't put my name on websites. I didn't take equity. I wanted insight, patterns, proof. Over time, the founders I helped started calling me back, not for advice, but for money. And so, I formed Langford Meridian Ventures. I chose the name carefully. Professional, forgettable, impossible to link directly to me. The entity was legally separated from anything personal, routed through holding companies that never used the words Verity or sister. I became a silent partner in a dozen ventures, but only 2 truly mattered. One failed fast. The other was Evolve Insight. When their founding team reached out, they had already burned through their first seed round. The product was good, elegant, scalable, efficient, but their user data had plateaued, and investors were circling like vultures, sniffing for signs of mismanagement. I saw something different. Their CEO, Jalen Reeves, didn't posture or sell hype. He sent me raw documents, admitted mistakes, and outlined how he'd fix them. I wired the funds within 48 hours. 3 months later, the CMO resigned unexpectedly. I watched the hiring updates from afar. It took me a moment to recognize the name when they announced her, Clarissa Langford. It almost felt like a joke. But there it was, my sister stepping into a leadership role at a company that only still existed because I had kept the lights on. At first, I thought about pulling my investment, not out of spite, but because I didn't want proximity. I didn't want to invite the ghosts of comparison or resentment. But the math was clean. The market was warming. Clarissa's background in brand partnerships was sound. And frankly, I wasn't about to disrupt a company's trajectory, just to keep my past tidy. I stayed. I watched Clarissa rebrand the company's messaging. I watched her land 3 big-name clients and get featured in Forbes Next. I even saw a photo of her standing beside Jalen on a rooftop with the caption, "The dynamic team behind Evolve's exponential rise." She looked proud. The kind of proud that doesn't ask where the scaffolding came from. Once, I caught a clip of her on a podcast, talking about leadership. "You have to know who's in the room," she said. "Who believes in the mission? Who puts skin in the game?" I nearly laughed. I wondered if she'd ever asked who saved payroll that January. If she ever looked at the cap table closely enough to see the percentage held by Langford Meridian Ventures. Or maybe, like so many others, She assumed NP Holdings, our partner company, was the real power behind it all. She never knew I sat in 2 quarterly board calls under an alias. That when her marketing team requested an emergency budget extension last spring, I was one of the 3 people who signed off. I told myself I didn't care, that it was better this way. Let them believe what they needed to. Let her think she climbed on her own. And maybe I would have kept it that way if the gala hadn't happened. When the invitation arrived, I stared at the envelope longer than I should have. It was beautiful, embossed in silver, like something from a royal wedding. Inside, the letter thanked key partners for their support and invited distinguished contributors to attend a private ceremony honoring those who had made Evolve's success possible. There was a line at the bottom: "Names will not be disclosed until the evening of the event to preserve the impact of recognition." I knew what that meant. They were going to say my name. Maybe not all of it, but enough. I wasn't sure how I felt, not excited, not vindicated, just steady. It wasn't about being seen anymore. It was about the quiet joy of a full circle, of knowing I had never needed to fight for a chair at their table, because I'd built my own, and now they were dining off it. I booked a ticket, chose a black dress that didn't beg attention, and made a promise to myself. I would say nothing, not even if they finally looked at me, not even if they apologized. The truth didn't need my voice anymore. It had already taken the stage. The gala was held at a private hall just off Park Avenue, one of those buildings where the carpets hush your footsteps and the chandeliers never stop shimmering. I arrived early, not to be seen but to watch. The space was already alive with movement. Waiters in pressed uniforms passed trays of champagne and miniature crab cakes. Investors mingled near screens cycling through Evolve's growth charts. Clarissa stood near the center in a sleek ivory gown, her hair in an updo I recognized from old debutante photos. She was glowing, smiling, owned the room the way she'd always been taught to. My parents were there too, my father in his sharpest navy suit, my mother draped in emerald silk. I watched them greet other guests with the same pride they used to reserve for Clarissa's report cards. They didn't notice me. They walked right past me, twice. It was freeing. I chose a table in the back, close to the wall. From there I could see the stage, the crowd, the rise and fall of voices. No one looked twice at me. I could have been a consultant, a vendor, a +1 who got separated. It didn't matter. That was the power of invisibility. And tonight, it was working for me. The evening opened with polite speeches, numbers, milestones, polished gratitude. Clarissa gave a short address, thanking mentors and advisors, saving her biggest thanks for the bold vision of our founding team and the incredible capital partners who believed in us before we were anyone. I tilted my head slightly. She didn't know I was here. She didn't know she was talking about me. Then Jalen Reeves took the stage. Calm, confident, in a charcoal suit that didn't need flash. He spoke differently, less performative, more grounded. He thanked the board, acknowledged the roller coaster of the early years, and then paused. And tonight, he said, we're doing something special. We've never publicly named this person. We've never needed to, but they believed in us when most doors were closed. Their trust gave us not just survival, but a runway. And their silence, ironically, taught us the value of real partnership. There was a beat of silence, a subtle shift in the room. He smiled and continued. You may not know them, but you should. Because without them, we wouldn't be standing here. So tonight, we're honoring our largest private investor, the one behind Langford Meridian Ventures. My name wasn't spoken yet, but the murmurs began. Clarissa's smile tightened. My parents glanced at each other. Then Jalen said it. Verity Langford. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed like a stone in still water. Chairs shifted, heads turned. Clarissa looked toward the back, blinking. My father sat perfectly still. My mother's lips parted in confusion, almost fear. I stood slowly. Not dramatically, just deliberately. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't smiling. I didn't wave. I didn't scan for their reactions. I walked toward the stage with the calm of someone who no longer needed anything from this room. Jalen met me halfway and extended his hand. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything." I took the mic only briefly. "I believe in quiet builders," I said, "and in second chances that don't come with explanations. Thank you for being one of them." Then I stepped down, returned to my table, and sat. I didn't look at Clarissa. Not yet. That moment was still coming. I sat back down at my table, folded my hands in my lap, and exhaled quietly. No one joined me. No one dared. The applause had faded into an odd sort of hush, the kind that clings when a room has just witnessed something they can't quite process. I could feel their eyes, especially hers. Clarissa didn't move at first. I watched from the corner of my eye as she remained near the stage, smile frozen, body still angled toward the spotlight that had just abandoned her. Then she turned. She moved across the ballroom with quick, composed steps, the kind trained for cameras and donors and press. But her eyes, those weren't composed. They flickered, like someone desperately flipping through pages, trying to catch up with a story they should have read long ago. "Verity," she said when she reached me, voice pitched low, almost rehearsed. That was unexpected. I looked at her and waited. I didn't fill the silence. She sat down, uninvited, smoothing the satin of her gown with restless hands. "You invested?" she asked finally. "In Evolve?" "Yes," I said. She blinked. "From the beginning?" I nodded. Clarissa let out a soft half-laugh, more disbelief than amusement. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I wasn't asked," I said evenly. She stared at me. "But we've had dinners, family things. You could have told me." I tilted my head. Would it have mattered? Her mouth opened, then closed. I saw it click behind her eyes. Every time she'd interrupted me, every time she'd brushed off my work, every holiday where she recounted her achievements while I cleared dishes no one noticed I brought. She tried again. I don't understand. Why would you invest in a company I work for and say nothing?" I held her gaze. "Because I believed in the company," I said, "not in being seen." That shut her up, just for a second. But Clarissa had always been good at recovering. She leaned forward slightly. "You do realize how this looks, right? You let everyone think—" "That I failed?" I interrupted. "That I disappeared?" She stopped. "I didn't correct the record, Clarissa, because it wasn't mine to fix. You were all comfortable with the version of me that made you feel superior. I just didn't see the point in disrupting your story." Her face faltered. From behind her, I saw our parents watching now. My mother's expression was unreadable. My father was gripping his wineglass too tightly. Clarissa's voice was quieter now. "You really put in that much money?" "More than the rest combined," I replied. Not proud, just factual. She leaned back like the words had weight. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." A silence stretched between us, dense with things we would never fully unpack. Then she whispered, "I thought you gave up." "I know," I said. "That's why it worked." She looked at me then, not as a sister, not even as a rival, but as someone who had misjudged the scale of something standing right beside her. She looked at me like I was a stranger who had rewritten the rules of the room. A beat passed. Finally, she asked, "Why now? Why let them name you?" I looked around the ballroom. "Because Jalen asked, and because, frankly, it was time." Clarissa opened her mouth, then stopped. Some part of her wanted to reclaim control, to shift the spotlight back. But there was no way to do it without sounding small. The narrative had already changed. Everyone had seen what they needed to. She rose slowly, collecting herself. "Are you coming to the family table?" she asked. I stood too. "No, I've already got a seat." I nodded once, a simple goodbye, then turned and walked past our parents without a glance. My name had already been said. The story had already been told, and I didn't need to explain a single word of it. I didn't stay for the applause. I walked out the side door, quiet as I came. No one stopped me. That silence was enough. Outside, the city felt still. In the car, I opened my phone. Jalen's message, thank you, a founder's email, a request for mentorship. I smiled. They once said I had no place at the table, but I stopped asking years ago. I built my own, with silence, grit, and memory. Tonight wasn't revenge. It was recognition. Late, but real. Let them toast and spin stories. I had something steadier, legacy, control, freedom. And now, they finally knew. The room they stood in only stood because I'd quietly held it up all along.